Fishing News is sponsored by these fine partners.
With your New Jersey, Delaware Bay region video fishing forecast for the weekend of August 20th, 21st, and 22nd, I'm Jim Hutchinson with the Fisherman magazine. Yes, why not start the weekend on Friday the 20th? Because some of the best reports I'm getting here at the Fisherman magazine on a regular basis are happening during the work week, Monday through Friday. Last Friday's Jumbo Fluke, the New Jersey Tarpon at Barnegat Inlet the week before, and this week, it's Monday morning bluefin at Seagirt Reef. Let me back up for a moment, because over the weekend on Saturday, I got a text from Captain Jimmy Frieda. You know him as a charter boat captain. He's an author, he's a lecturer, he's a teacher in Manasquan, but he's also manager for the Seagirt Reef, or Seagirt Beach Patrol. Now, yet another marlin in the surf on Saturday. That's what Jimmy told me. In addition to bluefin, big bluefin, he told me, right off the beach on Friday. And I'm sure, I would have to think, that any bluefin that were right off the beach on Friday, by the time the heavy boat traffic got out there on Saturday, sounded the fish, which is pretty much what I found this week when speaking with Gary Ward. See, Chris Johnstone and Gary Ward, they dropped some jaws on social media earlier this week. I even stumbled talking about that anymore. They posted some bluefin that they caught on their kayak. Now, that was right outside of Manasquan Inlet. In the past, I mean, this is amazing because I know guys who have gone offshore with kayaks in the past. They've taken the mothership out, and then when they get on the bluefin, they drop the kayak and get in on the bluefin tuna. But this is the first that I remember hearing about a couple of guys paddling from shore and getting out to the tuna grounds. Now, especially when these guys were geared up for fluke and Spanish mackerel. But that's exactly what happened. For this week's headline report, I had a chance to sit down with Gary Ward on Tuesday out at Fisherman Supply in Point Pleasant to kind of go through this amazing experience that he had, and then perhaps also offer a little bit of advice for you at home.
So we planned the fluke trip, and we know that the Spanish, the bonita, and the mahi normally come in this time of year, so we always prep for that. We've seen the bluefin in previous years, the last 3 years, from about August until the end of October in close. We've never been able to actually get on them because they're always a little too far away, anywhere from a quarter to a half mile away. And by the time we get to them, they're down. So yesterday, when we finally got out, we were heading out towards the Seagirt Reef. We were about 2 miles off, and we started to see some Spanish flashing. So we stopped, and we were just kind of hanging out in the area. It was just a blank area. We started to notice little bait balls on the surface. They look like little rainfish or little spearing. So we started fluking, and then all of a sudden, the first football came out. And then they just erupted around us, and we were able to hook up on one. And then they pushed back down. We landed the one, got a good release on it, got some pictures, and then we started fluke fishing again, thinking that was it. But that made the day. So it was about an hour later, 2 boats were on top of us, and we had pushed a little bit closer to the reef, probably about another quarter mile to a half mile out, and they blew up again right in front of us, and we were able to hook up on our second and third fish out of that pod. And I think there's really no, I mean, epic is the word that can be used. You just don't expect it, but when it finally happens, it's just one of those things. It's amazing.
What were you throwing?
We were throwing, it's just a little metal. It's similar to your epoxy jig or crippled herring or anything like that. I don't even know the name of the brand.
Color or speed didn't seem to matter at this point?
It did not matter. I mean, I got 4 cranks on the reel each time that it landed near them, and that was it. The last school that we were up on was a very large school of bluefin, and there were some fish 60 to 80 pounds in with the smaller ones. And I don't know if that's what caused the littler ones to be more competitive, but they were a foot to 2 foot off the side of the kayak rolling on the surface while I was hooked up, and It was a scene out of National Geographic. It was like, you know, if you watch the guys that hand feed the giants, it was similar to that. We could have literally just hand fed these tuna yesterday right off the side of the kayak. It's something that you'll never forget, and it'll always be that memory that you have stored in the back of your head.
Now, I mentioned that boat traffic earlier at the start of this week's video, and that whole concept of stealth in the kayak fishery, especially when you're considering the squirreliness of some of these pelagics. It's something for which Gary had an interesting angle in describing his particular Hobie kayak.
I run out of the Hobie PA 12 in camo. I have it decked out with a Torqeedo 403 ultralight motor. It pushes me about 5 miles an hour. I got a range of about 10 to 15 miles running, you know, full throttle here and there all day. After the first one was landed, a couple of boats came up on us, and they started working the area, and that put the fish down immediately. So the engine noise is definitely going to push the fish down. So the more boats you have, the more likely it's going to be harder for you as a kayak angler to successfully catch and land one of them, because they're such a fast moving fish.
Of course, the immediate question that I had, and especially tuna guys are going to have, is what about the HMS permit? Because you don't think about a guy in a kayak getting his HMS permit. As you know, to target bluefin, yellowfin, big eye, longfin, sharks, marlin, etc., you need to pay the $26 fee over at hmspermits.noaa.gov. HMS permits, just look up HMS permits. So most guys wouldn't think you can register a kayak, but if you get the whole number, for example, as Gary's going to talk about, if you get an outboard on there, special kicker motor on that kayak, you're going to have to get the whole number. But what Gary has found out is that you can get that HMS permit for a kayak.
So you have to go on their website, and well, I've done this a couple times. I've been on their website to try to get my HMS permit. You just have to fill out your information as far as your state registration number. So when you get your kayak and you put a motor on it, you have to register your motor or register your kayak. So once I did that, it made me eligible to do that. Now I have heard of one case, my buddy Keith Boland, who has a kayak that does not have a motor, but he did, and he was able to get a HMS permit. So he's actually going to be helping me later get mine, so that this way next time when we're out there, I can bring one back in.
Of course, anybody that's got their HMS permits, just keep in mind, we've got to report our catches. Bluefin, if you're throwing them back, catching them, whatever, make sure you do your reporting, whether you've got a 46, a 62, or a 12-foot kayak. If you get that HMS permit, make sure you do your reporting. One last thought. As someone who both kayaks and runs a little center console, you need to be seen. As much as stealth is a key benefit of being out there on a kayak, you don't want to be too stealthy off the beach in 2 to 4 foot swells, especially when guys are on a smaller center console and you're lower to the water. It's very hard to see. So I would really encourage you to keep some of Gary's advice in mind as you're gearing up for kayak fishing.
Make sure you have a handheld VHF radio, and the number one thing, have a flag. Make sure that the boats can see you. Make sure that you're visible enough to the surrounding area that they don't think you're just a lobster pot, because you can get hurt.
Now, weather-wise, it's looking good for some inshore bluefin expeditions, especially with light westerlies in the forecast. He's only about 3 feet on Friday. So again, yeah, it's a good benefit to try to get your weekend started a little bit early, or even extending it into Monday. Now, offshore, the early week forecast from NOAA Weather looked a little kinder than it did by the middle of this week. Tropical storms Fred, Grace, and Henri, or is it Henri? I'm not sure. All mixing things up a little bit this week. By the weekend, you offshore runners will want to keep on top of that NOAA weather forecast, however, from the Hudson to Baltimore, especially as Henri breezes by the coast on his way north and northeast. Now, in addition to bluefin, another report of a Barnegat Bay cobia comes to us this week by way of Anthony Fiore. So be on the lookout for these torpedoes especially when you're off the beach where we're getting some of the bigger cobia, but we're getting reports from Delaware Bay all the way up to the south shore of Long Island. Just keep in mind you've got a vessel limit, one per vessel, and it's got to be 37 inches in length or greater. Now Trevor here, he had a wonderful birthday down on Delaware Bay this week. He was out on the charter boat Duchess out of Fortescue, and yep, he caught and released small cobia on that trip. Also found out from the captain there that they also had a mess of bluefish, some croaker, weakfish, and spot as well. Still getting some pretty good weakfish reports. I'm waiting to hear back from Captain Dave DeGennaro. He's got some spots in Barnegat Bay where he goes out live grass shrimping, and he's been doing pretty well, doing some weakfish charters in recent weeks. Speaking of spot, Manny Butera let me know he was fishing off of Stone Harbor Beach last week, found non-stop action on those Cape May goodies. 35 of them, along with one kingfish. So if you're looking for a little back bay potpourri, not just the grass shrimping for weakfish, but also the chum pot and clams, it's a great fishery for you to get out someplace quiet, find yourself a hole or a slough someplace off a side channel, off the main channel, away from the boats. It's a great opportunity for you to get out with the kids and get some frenetic action. You can load up the pen with spot. The kids love catching spot, and you just throw them in the live well so you can take them to the tuna grounds later on. And the blowfish action especially has been pretty good in certain parts of the state. We're finding some good reports around the Research Buoy in Barnegat Bay, some areas of Great Bay and Little Egg Harbor as well if you want to set up with a chum pot and go for some blowfish. Get slick and bring your chum. That's the article you want to look up in the search bar over at thefisherman.com. My buddy Bob Misak wrote that. It was featured in the August 2020 edition of the New Jersey Delaware Bay edition of the Fisherman magazine. If you're a Fisherman subscriber, I was going to ask, is your subscription up? Are you signed up? Are you a paid member? Because if you are, make sure you go online, get your username and password, because then you have access to everything over there at the fisherman.com website. If you go click on that article and you can't get access to it, the firewall may have come down, so you need to log in. You only get a couple of articles a month, so make sure you take a look at that. Make sure you subscribe too. You can also, while you're over at thefisherman.com, do a search of smooth puffer. Now, we get a few reports every season here at the Jersey Shore, but the smooth puffer fish and the northern puffer, which we call blowfish, they're different species. Now, this one caught by Michael Dodone this week on Raritan Bay aboard Bass Appeal. It taped out at 23.5 inches, and Michael said it's still swimming, which is good because this is a smooth puffer, not advisable for you to take home and eat. Remember that old Simpsons episode about fugu? About the same. If you want something to eat, of course, you can't go wrong with Fluke. Nick Cicero sent this to me, a special summer reminder. Crispy fried Fluke caught 24 hours before, breaded in his homemade semolina crumbs with the perfect farm stand tomatoes and lettuce on Muller's Bakery fresh Kaiser roll out of Bayhead. It is the perfect summer meal. We've got another full month to go before summer flounder closes in New Jersey, so take advantage of it. Fluking right now continues to be good on the deeper structure, the offshore wrecks, some of those deeper potholes. Also in some areas, they're stacking up in the inlet on some of that fresh flow coming in. And of course, they're out around the wrecks and reefs in New Jersey, and of course the Delaware reef sites as well. Of course, some of the bigger specimens that we're finding, as usual, are coming from the northern end of the state, the farther north you go. As a matter of fact, Dennis Huber and his son Tommy, they trailered from Brigantine, went to the northern grounds, and got in on some better sized fluke using Riptide's mahi belly strips to get in on those flatties. Don't forget those strip baits. Strips of mackerel, Spanish mackerel, strips of sea robin, mahi it seems. And if in New Jersey, if you're going to use fluke belly, keep in mind that's allowed, but you need to have the rack of that fish that you use to get the strips in your cooler in case enforcement stops over. And one of those racks counts against your limit. So you're allowed 2 fish in that rack by the time you get home. The legend himself from the surf casting community, Shell E. Karras, with a beautiful 23-inch, 4.35-pound fluke caught on Gulp Island Beach, I would imagine. He weighed that in with the folks at Grumpy's Tackle. And now, if you're fishing in the suds for fluke this week, keep moving until you find fish. Some stretches of beach are simply devoid of fluke, such as the stretches in Bayhead that I worked recently. But then if you just move a couple of streets, a couple of miles, sometimes it's 5 feet at a clip. But you'll find those places where the fluke are stacked up. As Gary Ward mentioned earlier with those kayak pelagics, keep a few of those jigs handy as well if you're in the surf. Whether it's, the standard Deadly Dicks or Tsunami Slim Wave, they make their own jigs. They're a little bit less expensive. Of course, everybody talks about the epoxy jigs. That's the Hobie epoxy jigs. But any number of these jigs will work in terms of casting along the surf. Again, we've talked about it. Spanish mackerel are in. Who knows? You might be able to hook into a bonita, possibly even a cobia. But you want to make sure some of those metals, especially as you see some of the turns, slowing down, diving on something. I was out fluking in the wash this week with no luck, but I didn't have any of the jigs. I wished I did, because you'd see turns flying nice and slow above the surface. And I figured, boy, that's my action. Could be a bluefish even. Back-based stripers, sheepshead, and a fluke tournament update coming up next. But first, let's check in with my friend George, the Pocono Outdoors guy.
Well, hey, thanks, Jim. A rainy day here in the Poconos is a good time to get your rods fixed up and get ready for the upcoming fall season. It's only a couple more weeks, maybe 5 more weeks, and we're going to start to see some color here in the Poconos. Leaves will start changing, water will start really cooling down, and that fall bite is going to turn on. But the weather's been cooperating pretty well besides the rain. We pulled back from those real high 90 temperatures. We've been in the high 70s, low 80s. Little bit of rain we got to deal with for the next few days, but those water temperatures are starting to creep down and hopefully turn on that fall bite. And the bite's been still going strong regardless of the weather. I checked in with a few folks. Eric Goodstall said the bass are really biting. He's been going out, getting some on these local lakes and ponds here in the Poconos, but even a little bit further west, out towards Harrisburg, good friend Shane Fry, he's been out working on Lake Mead. Now that's the Pennsylvania Lake Mead, by the way, hitting the bass with a chatterbait. And Shane said the fishing's been incredible. He's landed and released over 100 bass in the last week. So fishing's good out there, guys. And the chatterbait, white chatterbait, seems to be the ticket for that. Now, just touching on the Delaware River as well, I reached out again to my good friend Tim Keebler. He said the smallmouth are just on fire. He says that a little bit of water cooling down is really sparking them on. Get on out the river for that big smallmouth bite. Guys, enjoy the weather. It's coming. Fall is coming. Hang in there. So get out and get on them. From Pennsylvania, I'm George, your Pocono Outdoors guy.
Now, I know fall stripers are on the minds of a lot of surfcasters at the Jersey Shore, but I'll tell you, the bait blooms in the estuaries at this point has turned the outback bass bite on as well. Chris Madison told me he's finding a number of residents on the sod banks of Atlantic County, and they're crushing plugs like there's no tomorrow. His words. There's a lot of bait around. He said he's scoring stripers up to 30 inches at this point. So definitely time to look towards those sod banks as some of those peanut bunker get active. And again, as Gary said at the opening here, a lot of bait on the inshore grounds especially. I'm hoping that's a good sign for the fall. I'm hoping that's a good sign for the sand eel bite come October and November. Full moon on Sunday could also trigger some action in the back, some more of the bait moving. And who knows, in parts of the state, you might see a cinder worm hatch over this weekend into early next week as well. Our South Jersey editor, Anthony Califano, told us in this week's reports, posted every Monday, that big sheepshead up to 14 pounds have been caught from Margate down to Cape May. He said it appears that just about every bridge, pier, or dock may be holding some type of fish. And of course, don't forget, you've got that 1 fish bag limit on tog, so you still have an opportunity with those as well. Down into Delaware as well, where the folks at Lewis Harbor say the sheepshead bite is pretty hot down there. They said Brett Chauncey and Brian Conero caught a few of them this week using sand fleas around some rock piles. Now, Brett here caught a 10.23 pound citation fish. Brian's largest was 8.72 pounds. Those two guys fished on Brian's boat, the Meat Wagon, which apparently lived up to its name. If you're meat fishing on the Fluke grounds this weekend at the Jersey Shore, you might also want to register in the 22nd annual Greater Saltwater Open Fluke Tournament presented by the Ozarks Sportsman's Club. That event is Saturday, August 21st. Call Rob, 609-516-5555. 4096 to see if you can still get in on that Saturday event. By the way, got word this week that the annual JCAA Fluke tournament scheduled for September 4th is not being held this year. They canceled that event this week. You can get more details over at jcaa.org. Now, our members only Dreamboat Fishing Challenge at the Fisherman magazine continues, and it continues through November. Don't forget, you have to subscribe to enter that tournament. And it's not a single fish that wins you your boat. You got to get multiple fish. It's points across 8 different species, 10 places in each. But just by being on the board with a jumbo fish this season, you're going to walk away with some type of prize. And as we learned with Mark Blazik last week, it's never too late to enter. Well, it is a little late to enter. He entered after that 15.5-pound fluke. But he's got a hot spot on the rare and he's looking for another one. Get more details in the August edition of the Fisherman magazine. It's in newsstands right now, tackle shops as well. You can pick it up for all the local action, get all the details on the Dreamboat contest, get the fishing reports, and find out what's going on in your neighborhood as well. Hardtails are in play now. Spanish mackerel, bonita, hopefully a few false albacore on the horizon, especially in central and north Jersey, which turns on first. So hopefully this will happen as you're entered into the Coastal Kayak Clash. You don't know all about it? It's free. And if you're a kayak fisherman, you want to get on board. I'm going to leave you with an update with Dave Anderson and our CKC updated for this week, August 19th. And until next week, catch them up, my friends. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I hope you can make it 3 or 4 days.
Well, after a very active week last week in the Coastal Kayak Clash, this week the defense rests. We did not receive a single entry. So here's a quick look at the leaderboard. There's no changes up there, but remember, the fish of the month this month is a sea robin. Go out there and get yourself a big bird. You might just win yourself a $100 gift certificate to yakattack.com. Good luck this week, guys. We'll see you guys next week.
Steigercraft boats, built by people who fish our waters. Serious anglers choose Steigercraft for their 40 years of boat building experience right here in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. Visit steigercraft.com for a dealer near you.